Well, good evening. Welcome back to my channel. My name is David, and today we're going to just kind of wrap up some of what I've been reading in the last month and a half. It's a short list for this month, and talk a little bit about some of the things I read last month, and the couple of books that I'm reading right now. So let's just dive right into it. We'll start with the book that I finished tonight, which was my first Joe Haldeman book that was not in his Forever series. That is The World Without End, a Star Trek experience. So this is a read for Book Trek 2022. And what I have to say about this, first and foremost, I've never been a fan of Star Trek. I've never got hooked on the shows, the movies, any of it. And so this was my first Star Trek book, thankfully nice and short. Joe Haldeman writes well, no doubt about that. If it had been any other author, I might not have even finished this. Told an okay story, but this will probably be the only Star Trek book I ever read. It just didn't really grip me. I don't have any real investment in the characters or anything like that, to the point where a bigger fan of the Star Trek universe would have a lot of fun with it. So, Michael K. Vaughn, if you are watching and you would like this copy, I will send it out to you. Just let me know in the comments and I'll get this coming your way. I imagine that this would go really well in your vintage science fiction box that you are trying to fill for your last one. And you never know, something else might make its way over there along with it. You know, one or two things. So, the next book that I finished is a big book. That's because I listened to it on audiobook. This was one of the 6 books I picked as a book that I wanted to try to read by the end of this year. In my Why Haven't I Read These Books Yet? And so this is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. And his name has been synonymous for years with fantasy series that you need to read. Anytime I would look into it, his name would be on that short list with, George R. R. Martin, with J.R.R. Tolkien, with Brandon Sanderson, as some of the giants of the genre. And I absolutely loved it. It may have been my favorite book that I've read in the last almost 2 months now. Absolutely delightful. I've got, what is it? Wise Man's Fear on my shelf. I'll probably be diving into that sometime soonish because I absolutely enjoyed this. Next, we had another super short one, the Vinland Sagas. This is what I picked for my medieval monthly pick, and I'm glad that I picked something that was only about 50 pages long because it's just been that kind of a reading month. This is the end of what I've read this month. Everything else I read at least the bulk of last month. It's been a month, but I absolutely enjoyed these. 2 very different sagas in here. The Greenlander Saga and Eric the Red Saga. Greenlander Saga is written more like a history. It tells of 6 different voyages into the New World. And Eric the Red Saga is more of a traditional style family saga. And both of them, have interesting characters, interesting nicknames. Freydis is a character that appears in both of them and is probably the one that steals the show in both of them. In one for fighting off Skraelings, I think it is, while pregnant after bearing a breast and wielding a sword. And the other one, she does a lot of slaughter and bloodshed. Leads. There's men, they go and kill the Skraelings, and they say that they won't kill the women. And she says, well, I'll do it then. And takes a sword and butchers them all. Very violent. Icelandic sagas are not going to be the most tame things that you ever read, but really interesting characters. And a good sample size. this is one that I no longer need, but I've already found a home for where to be sending that. Because it is in my big Sagas of the Icelanders volume. So the ones that I finished recently, either late last month or very, very early this month, if there was any kind of bleed over, I finished Volume 1 of Die. This is Volume 1 Fantasy Heartbreaker by Gillen, Hans, and Cowles. So, absolutely enjoyed this. This is... If you have any connection to Dungeons and Dragons, whether in the past you used to play it, if you play it now, or if you just like fantasy and the idea of role-playing, this is a wonderful volume. Really imaginative. With some good artwork. You know, it's not quite as top tier as Monstrous, but very, very enjoyable. Very interesting. So, like, you know, they have very unusual classes for their characters, and that makes for a really interesting story. I'm excited to dive further into that. As a side note, I did read issue 1 out of volume 1. I checked it out from the library of the Once and Future King, or Once and Future, I think it is, which is an Arthurian graphic novel, and wow, that one's going on the list of ones I want to check out as well. So now I've got Saga, I've got Huntress, I've got Die, and I've got Once and Future. So I've got 4 graphic novel series that I'm very, very much looking forward to continuing. And then the last one that I have a copy of, and there were a couple last month I'm going to talk about that I did as kind of new releases that I checked out from my library. But I did read City by Clifford D. Simack, and this is magnificent. It was sitting at the spot of being my favorite read until I got through the Rothfuss book. And it'd be a toss-up between the two. This is a really interesting premise with it being dogs telling the stories, and they don't quite believe that men are actually real anymore, that they are myths passed down through generations, but they're stories involving the humans, and just really, really fascinating take on this. For being one of those novels where they are different short stories kind of pieced together, this worked really, really well together. So I imagine that he had to have known in his mind as he was crafting these, that these would go together. So, magnificent. So, a couple of books I read last month. A couple of my friends, Rachel from RK Stumbling Bear and Kristen from Kristinell SFF Reader, were hosting New Release-a-thon. And so I asked them both for recommendations of books that they would suggest that I would enjoy. And I was given 2 recommendations from each of them. So I read all 4 of those. I read Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi, which I did chat on earlier last month. And really, really enjoyed that. Scalzi is just a comfort style of science fiction author. I really enjoy his writing. His pacing is fabulous, and it's a lot of fun. I read Ogres by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which was my first experience with Tchaikovsky, and it told a really interesting tale. It's novella length, so about 150 pages, and it's almost exclusively written in the second person, and that never stopped being like a pebble in the shoe as you're walking. Like, you can tune it out for a while. You can still get around, even if it's not causing you pain, but you always can sense it there, and it's just irritant. I was not a fan of that choice. It made sense, the very final paragraphs, why he chose that option. But I think there were other ways he could have done that. Yeah. But other than that, enjoyable story. Tchaikovsky clearly can write, and I'm looking forward to getting to finally picking up some more of his writings. I can't remember the author, the book is a middle grade book. Valentina Salazar is not a monster hunter. And this was the other recommendation by Rachel. She also recommended to me the Kaiju Preservation Society, and it was a lot of fun. I had a hard time putting it down. It was the type of read that I needed, and it helped me mostly close out August on a high note. Between City and reading that, just was magnificent. A whole lot of fun. And I hope that she'll be doing sequels to that book. And then the last book I read was Upgrade by Blake Crouch, which is, well, if you've read Blake Crouch, you probably know what you're getting out of it. It's less sci-fi and more of a science thriller. Very fast-paced, actiony. Lots of scientific jargon that felt like it was being forced in there to just show how intelligent Blake Crouch was. I feel like a lot of that probably could have been toned down a little bit in there. And it was fine. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't love it either. It was my first introduction to Blake Crouch, and obviously I probably will pick up something like Dark Matter at some point. Time to give it a try, because a lot of people love Blake Crouch, and I want to find out why. But for me, it was okay. A couple notches below Scalzi, but the same kind of feel. It feels like the type of book that you would want when you want something fast-paced, that's easy to read in science fiction. And that would fit the bill. And that there's nothing wrong with that. It just won't ever be a favorite for me. But I did enjoy it. And so I've got 2 books that I'm reading right now. And I'm enjoying both of them. I'm not very far in either of them yet. The one I'm further in so far is I, Claudius by Robert Graves. This was also on my Why Haven't I Read These Books Yet video. And this is the from the autobiography of Tiberius Claudius. And this is one that I know Michael K. Vaughan speaks really highly of. And I'm looking forward to diving further into this. And last but not least, I'm going to try not to go blather on too much longer. I started just yesterday, The Martian by Andy Weir. And really enjoying the style so far. It's I can see why it's been a very, very popular read. So yeah, really interesting so far. As you can see, I'm not very far in at all. I'm probably 30 pages in. Yeah, about 30 pages in. So not a whole lot has happened. And I imagine that's going to be true for big chunks of the book. But it's written in that travelogue, almost diary style that makes it engaging to read along the way. So there you have it. I just wanted to give an update. It's been hard to find time to read consistently. It's been hard to find time to make videos. I wanted to make a full video on talking about the those 2 sagas, but I just don't think that's going to be able to happen. And so while I'm still going to be reading my medieval monthly picks, my ambition on making videos for them probably need to be toned down a little bit, because I'm not sure how often I'll be able to make videos for at least the next couple months. My schedule, my life is just blown up. And so, I mentioned to my wife yesterday when I had read about 8-10 pages of The Martian that it had been a good day, because I had gotten the most reading I had done in a whole week. And she's like, "That's good." I'm like, "Yeah, I got about 8 pages in." And she's like, "That's it. You just need to be reading when we get home after the kids are in bed. You just need to sit down and read." I'm like, "I'd like to, but I have other things I have to do too." So I tried to balance both of those and got through another 20 of those. And then I finished off the last 50 pages of The World Without End tonight. To try to get that just pushed through and done and off the plate. And I did enjoy it. So there you go. I'm starting to just ramble a lot, so I'm just gonna end this here. Thank you as always for sticking around, for watching, and I hope you. I'm enjoying watching your content. Those of you that are making booktube videos, even if I'm not commenting as often, I'm watching still plenty. And those of you that don't have a channel and are just regular commenters, thank you for sticking around, for following, and for watching. In light of my very, very sporadic video making lately.